Also featuring a time-traveling blockbuster employee from 1997. It's PDQ Live.
And we are on.
Hey everybody, welcome to PDQ Live. We're talking about backups today, and once again, this is something where Tara and I, if we put our heads together, would be half of a solid employee on this. So we brought in subject matter experts to talk to us like we're really dumb.
Again, it's going to be amazing.
All right, so we have King Candy Corn?
Yeah, King Candy Corn. Yeah, JD.
JD. Mm-hmm. And so what do you guys work for? What's validate your expertise before we go.
Okay, I'll do that.
There's going to be a quiz after King Candy Corn. Go.
So I'm JD. I'm here with Bronson. We're with Veeam. We are the local team that are experts that I deal primarily with government and education as my specialty. And Bronson and I work together in providing solutions that protect our customers, really from ransomware, accidental deletions, such as the fat finger syndrome, and other issues that kind of compromise the data that folks are dealing with these days. So that's what we do.
And Bronson, what is your role at Veeam?
My name is Bronson Aber. I'm Senior Systems Engineer for Veeam, and I work alongside JD for both state and local government, as well as I also cover the commercial side of it as well. So, but here in Utah, excited to be here.
And between the two of us, we've probably got 40 years of experience in the industry.
That's right. Yeah, I just started last year, so I think that sounds about right.
Okay, so we're the old, fun sales team on this side, right? And they're the grouchy IT team on that side, right?
That's right.
Shouldn't the grizzled vets be the ones that are drinking?
Okay, anyway, back to the reality. We've been doing a lot of talk about security, right, Jordan? A lot of shows.
We're out of it now, but October was Security Month. And we're going to count this as October.
We're going to count it because you got to have backups, right? So we kind of want to have you guys on to say, help our viewers. What if you do get hit, right? So that's been the buildup that we've been leading up to. So we wanted to talk about backups and have you say, our viewers, what should you prepare for? Let's prepare for the worst. So we're going to anticipate one day we're going to get hit. So can you talk us through the best model? What should we have it be?
Mm-hmm. So first of all, it's not a matter of if. Mm-hmm. It's always a matter of when. And that's our belief at this point. There's too many cases out there now where folks have done everything they possibly can to prevent an issue, and they're going to get hit anyway. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah.
So what Veeam and Bronson and I focus on is teaching our customers kind of some of the methodologies around if you do get hit, here's how to prepare for it. And so we call it the Veeam Zip Code.
Yep.
And it's 32110 is the rule.
Okay.
So is that new? Because I've always heard 321. But adding 10, is that like something that's recently come along, or?
Yes, it is. It's been, about a year or so?
We expanded it, right, from the 321 rule and really built it out into availability zip code, as you mentioned. Yeah.
So I think everybody's pretty familiar with the 321 piece of it, right? And that is, you want 3 copies of the data, right? You want 2 different mediums, and that can obviously be a disk, it could be tape, it could be disk to cloud, it could be whatever. It just has to have 2 different types so that they don't get compromised in the same way at the same time.
Yep.
The other one is one offsite, right? It needs to be either on a tape offsite or it needs to replicate somewhere. The next ones is one immutable copy.
Okay, what does that mean?
So immutability means unchangeable, kind of the old worm technology, write once, read many. Most of our customers are starting to require that as something, and I'll talk about that as to why in just a minute. And then the last one is the 0. And 0 for us means just because you backed it up doesn't mean it's coming back unless you test it regularly. And so for us, that means we have to actually test those restores on a regular basis so that when we do have an issue, we know it's going to come back reliably. So that's where we get the 32110 in our methodology, or the zip code as we call it today.
So what's a good time to test it? How often? What's your recommendation? Is there one, or?
That's, I think, early and often, right? Yes. The sooner the better. Oftentimes people wait until somebody calls and says, hey, I need this file back or this folder back or something was compromised. And that's oftentimes where they traditionally would test those backups.
No, that's bad, though. We don't want to do that.
You don't want to find out that they're not going to work then. Right. So I think to JD's point, test it early. and try to automate that as much as possible.
Okay, so what's your recommendation though? I'm pretty crazy. So what would I do?
Well,
Daily, weekly, monthly?
I think it comes back to how long can you afford to be down?
Yep.
Okay, so
A day.
if your day, then I would make sure that you're testing those recoveries pretty regularly. I'd say at minimum weekly. If that is your recovery time objective, then I would check that as regularly as possible. And not all data is created equal, and Bronson will go into this. Some data is going to be more critical, and you'll want to test that more frequently because that has to come back fast.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Other data, user files sometimes aren't as critical.
Yep.
And so those, test them in your monthly backups when you're doing your monthlies.
Well, users aren't all created equal, right? I mean, I'm going to
Correct.
prioritize my executives over my,
Yes.
part-time accountants. Big difference.
The seventh favorite child in my family. I don't really like the system of going based on preferential treatment, but I understand the necessity. My question is, I have a brother who's way smarter than me, and he wasn't just offsite for one of his backups. He wanted to be on a completely different power grid based on the size of the disaster. Is that? I would love for you to tell me that's overkill, so I could take this as ammunition to really win one argument. But is that right, or is that where are we at on that one?
I'll let you take it.
Yeah, so I'm kind of the mindset that only the paranoid survive, right? So get as many copies of that data as you can, spread it out, have a copy on-prem, push one off to do a DR location, maybe even leverage cloud.
I trusted you to have my back, man.
I'm sorry.
Right.
I got you next time.
The other thing that's interesting, and this is something when we talk about this 32110, it really, the framework is because of the requirements that we're starting to see in the industry where organizations are starting to explore carrying cyber insurance, right? Because we know it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, okay? They're finding that they either need to self-insure or they need to go find a third party to carry insurance. Not that the insurance company is going to prevent it, but the insurance company is out there to help you through the remediation process if you do get hit. So they'll deal with, bringing a specialized team in to do the forensics. They'll come in and they'll provide services around what was exposed, how critical is it. And these cyber insurance company underwriters are coming in and saying, unless you have 32110 in place, you're not even insurable.
Yeah. So they're helping you be compliant,
Correct.
essentially. So, okay, I was really surprised when you guys brought this up. Tell me why I would get insurance if I'm going to pay it anyway. Why would I buy it?
So cyber insurance is dealing with two issues. Okay. The first is we all know if we're going to get hit, the ransomware, all they're looking for is money. Okay. They come in and they hold you ransom. They encrypt the data. By the way, they're encrypting the data, not just production now. They're sitting there inactive for, as we know, for sometimes up to 100 days, 110 days, months.
Yeah.
And then they'll go encrypt your backups at the same time. And that's how they're able to hold us hostage.
Yep.
So the insurance companies come in and they basically take a look at and they cover the cost of paying that ransom should you need to pay it. But more importantly, what they're doing is they're coming in and saying, if you don't pay the ransom, what is my exposure in the market if they release the data into the wild?
Yeah, the dark web.
The dark web, right? If they release sensitive data out there, that deals now all of a sudden you're responsible for supplying credit monitoring and identity protection, and all these things for the data that's been released into the wild. And your insurance is supposed to cover that in that case. So that's why folks are starting to look at either self-insuring or going and finding a third party. You can do everything you can on the front end, but you're going to get hit at some point.
Yeah.
What's my risk mitigation strategy if that's happening?
So if I'm government, if I'm hospital, that's much more important.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So, okay, that makes sense. Okay, because I had not even thought about that until you brought it up. So that's a fun new thing to worry about. Yay!
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, I actually have a question that we didn't talk about before. But so Bronson, should we practice how long it takes to restore from
Absolutely.
backup? Okay,
Yeah.
so actually practice from start to finish.
Yeah, I think you got to validate your business continuity strategy on a regular basis, right? So understanding, what applications have to come up, in what order, what dependencies are there between those applications is going to be paramount. So I think testing that and actually running through that exercise, documenting it, right, and keeping that documentation dynamic and up to date, traditionally has been a cumbersome process. We can automate a lot of that and simplify that so they can validate their DR capabilities on a regular basis.
Yeah, like how crazy do people get though? I mean, do they set up like a sandbox and like really replicate it exactly how? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of people, depending again on the tier of the application, right? Tier 1 applications, typically they're gonna test that on a more frequent basis.
Yeah.
Tier 2, Tier 3 applications could follow suit after that. But we can enable them to go spin up a sandbox on demand, so they don't have to wait until the catastrophe strikes to start that recovery. They can spin that up, test it during the day. They don't have to take down production. So I think there's a lot of value in verifying your continuity strategy.
Yeah. So like business critical systems, you would actually go through that practice. Is that something that your company does with your clients? Like, do you show them how to do it?
Yep, absolutely. So we have a full orchestration tool that will spin up workloads. We can inject scripts, start and stop services, fail over in a particular order, even with application dependency. So absolutely. We can automate a lot of that and keep the documentation up to date, which is usually the thing that falls, right? I mean, I've written a bunch of DR plans, and as soon as you leave that room, it's already out of date because something's changed. So,
well, also, if you do get hit, your mind is just shot. So it's good to have it prepared.
Yep, exactly.
So will you talk a little bit about the air-gapped backups? Because I'm really curious how this is different than air-gapping your network. Can you talk
and
about the
immutability,
difference?
right? What's the
and
difference in all that?
immutability. What's the difference?
Yeah. So for us, I think really the only true air-gapped solution would be like rotating drives. Or even tape, right? Because they're effectively off the network. They're not accessible. You get them off-site, and then you have an immutable copy that can't be modified, deleted, changed, encrypted. So I think from a true air-gap perspective, right, rotating drives or tape. If we talk about kind of following that 32110 rule, if we want to tier this up to object storage, right now it's more of a logical air-gap because technically it's still on the network, right? It's still connected. We can have a logical air gap where we could tier it to the cloud, offer another layer of immutability, right? So that those backups perhaps locally are immutable. When we tier it to the cloud, it's also immutable and now offsite away from hopefully harm's way, unless it's a catastrophic event. But so I think that's kind of where we go with air gapping.
Okay. So even if just make sure I understand this. If I have a tape backup and the backup is on my normal business facility, and I take it in the tape and I put it in a cute little container and I take it to a different location. Is that considered air gap?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So it's just the theory behind it.
Yeah.
Okay.
We
Makes sense.
even have customers that will replicate to another device within the environment and then basically just unplug the network cable.
Yep.
Okay. And that's
air
gapped.
gapping it as well. I think some of them do that.
But you still recommend keeping a copy at a different location?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
That makes sense. And then replicate it often and keep an up-to-date one.
Yep.
Okay.
I
That
know-
makes sense.
Nowadays, storage is cheap, relative, especially what it used to be. But when it comes to backups, do you want to use the cheaper level storage, or is there any sort of advantage to pay for the higher tier?
It's a great question. Yeah. And like many answers, it's going to depend. If you've got mission critical data that needs to come back up because it costs your organization money, the longer it's down,
Yeah.
okay, then you want to create the fastest possible storage repository you can to bring that data back. So we're receiving a lot of customers now that will actually put an all flash tier into their backup space for that mission critical data so that they can be up in minutes or seconds rather than taking hours to restore VMs.
Yep.
Somebody asked an interesting question on the chat, by the way, Bronson, and that was, what would recovery look like in the event that a disaster happened that destroyed the actual site and the BNR server, the Veeam server?
Yeah, that's a great question. So really the best part about Veeam is our backups are all self-contained. So if we lose an entire site, even if we lose the Veeam server itself, in my opinion, I think that Veeam server is ephemeral. It doesn't have to be there. We can lose it at any time. Spin up a new one, point us to that repository, whether it be on-prem, could be object storage. You can start that recovery straight away, right, directly from those backups. So,
Okay.
Yep.
So just so you know, we'll do questions at the very
Perfect.
end too. Depending on how many questions we're getting, I actually haven't been paying attention. Is there a lot, Jordan? A lot of questions?
We've got a couple in the queue.
Okay. So we'll come back to those
Great.
two, and I'm sure they'll ask more questions. But so that brings me to kind of our next topic, I think. Depending on where your backup is, some are going to be faster to restore. Yes, the cloud versus on-prem versus type of storage. So you just kind of spoke to business critical. You want it to be faster.
Yeah.
Can we talk a little bit about stuff we have in the cloud. So are we in hybrid? Are we in 365? Are we on-prem? Are we a mixture? How do you approach that kind of storage? And what's the setup like? So if I'm in a 365 environment and I'm hybrid, so I have an on-prem server and I also have a cloud, what does that look like? How do you approach your backups to that kind of situation? Is it different?
Not necessarily. I mean, if we're talking Exchange Online and Office 365, we fully support all in the cloud, all on-prem, or even a hybrid model, right? So to us, the data, it doesn't matter where it sits. We treat it all the same. As far as where we back it up to, we could back that up locally. We could even tier it up to go cloud to cloud. So we can take it from the M365 platform, which is really backed by Azure, push it over to like an AWS region. So now you've got this hybrid cloud approach, and you can kind of protect yourself from major outages from a hyperscaler perspective.
Okay. What in 365 should I back up additionally, though? Because I've read a lot about what is backed up with 365 and what isn't. And I know we kind of talked about some of the stuff that is backed up in SharePoint. So Teams, OneDrive, and stuff that isn't. So Intune and Azure. What do you advise your customers to have double backups of?
So according to best practices in today's day and age, and let me just kind of clear up some misconception on this. So a lot of folks are under the impression that if it's in 365, Microsoft is backing it up for me and taking care of it. All my data is safe and protected. Unfortunately, that is not the case.
Lies, all lies, Bronson.
They, in your shared responsibility model, which is your contract with Microsoft for 365, they have something called the shared responsibility model, and it's in section 6 if you want to look it up. And it just basically says, look, the application uptime is our responsibility. The data that you send to us, however, is your responsibility. Yep. There are tools such as, they've got the, geo-replication, which allows them to, have that data in multiple sites. But let's remember what that's there for. That's for them to make sure that the application is up and running 24/7, not that your data is there and available. You have the recycle bin, right? You have these other tools that they've given you that you can pull data back, but it doesn't protect that data from a purposeful or an accidental deletion by a user or an admin. And that immediately replicates to another site. That we also have to remember that email is still the greatest vulnerability of every organization. Yep. And if something comes in through an end user and is immediately replicated to their OneDrive, guess what? It's corrupt in both locations now. Yeah. So Veeam is recommending that we back up 365 with a third-party tool, and you should be protecting all that data, not just the mailbox, but the OneDrive, the SharePoint, and the Teams. Veeam happens to be the only one now currently certified to back up Teams data behind Microsoft. So, Teams is an interesting animal, and Bronson can hit it a little harder, but Teams has data spread out across the entire tenant. Yep. It is a difficult animal to back up. And so what we recommend for folks is, we have the granular restore and backup capability. You can back up one or the other. You can exclude users. You can do all these things that should be possible within a decent backup product, right? But we're telling folks you should be backing it up either on-prem or to another cloud target because it is not Microsoft's responsibility to get it back for you.
Do you think a lot of people think that they're safe though?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. That's not just for O365. That's AWS. If somebody's running cloud native workloads or EC2 workloads, Azure, GCP, that same shared responsibility model will follow suit. Yeah. Regardless of where it's at. And I think from a Microsoft perspective, I really like to kind of summarize the shared responsibility model kind of like a parking garage, right? I mean, the company who built the parking structure is responsible to keep that standing. But when you park your car inside, they have signs everywhere that, this is at your own risk. So
still your car.
It's still your car. Everything inside is your responsibility. They're not covering that. Yeah. So to me, that's kind of where, once you start to unpack that a little bit, it becomes very clear. And you can see it all over their website, their service agreement directly.
No one reads those, Bronson.
I know.
We just hit yes and move on with our life.
Disagree. Yes.
This is where my genius really steps in because my car, much like my data, has no value. So people just leave it alone.
Okay, so now we know where we stand. What should we do? What should we do to back up this data? What's the most critical to back up, honestly? And what do you guys suggest?
I think from an O365 perspective, back it up holistically, protect everything. JD mentioned it, right? If you create a team inside of Office 365 or Microsoft 365 now, it creates a shared mailbox, it creates a SharePoint site, and there's document libraries that are shared within that entire group. So for us, protect everything holistically. Obviously, exclude people that don't have any valuable data inside there, but you can be very prescriptive with how you deploy it and what you decide to protect.
Well, I'm curious because doesn't Teams back up to SharePoint? Shouldn't I start with SharePoint?
I mean, that's a component of it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
But as you said, Teams is kind of goes everywhere.
It's scattered. Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about Azure? That would be my concern if I'm a 365 admin. Don't I worry about Azure?
As far as like the backbone, I guess it is technically running in Azure. It's in their stack. But if we talk about Azure Compute, like actually running workloads, we can protect those the same. They are not. They're not in the same, I guess, back-end infrastructure, right? O365 and Azure are segmented. But yeah, certainly if you have, platform as a service SQL databases, if you have compute instances, even file systems, absolutely protect those in the cloud as well, because they have no intent or desire to protect that data.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it.
Yeah.
And what are you guys seeing as far as trends go? Are more companies moving to cloud only and abandoning on-prem file servers and on-prem domain controllers? Are you seeing that happening now?
I don't think it's a holistic move to the cloud. I think there are certain workloads that lend themselves to being in the cloud. And so we're seeing more and more folks push certain applications there. And whether it's a desire to protect themselves from an on-site failure or whether it's a desire to reduce their manpower requirements to maintain hardware. We're seeing folks put certain workloads out there. And I'll give you some examples. If you've got an application that is extremely volatile, it scales up one day, scales down another day, or it's seasonal in nature. I'll give you, in my space in government and education, registration. Okay. Banner applications, which is their, student information system for registration, they will put out in the cloud because of its ability to scale up quickly during certain times of the year, and then they scale it back. And so they're not having to buy for the peaks anymore. Yeah. Those are the things that we're seeing folks shove out to the cloud almost immediately. Startup organizations immediately are going to the cloud to kick things off. But there are certain things that they want to keep on-prem. Yeah. And that's not mission critical. I would say data that is proprietary in nature or, super, super sensitive. Yeah. People are still really leery to shove that out into the cloud holistically. Yeah. So that's what we're seeing is it used to be, we have a cloud only mandate or cloud first. All of a sudden people are pulling back and they're saying, wait a minute, there's certain data that makes sense for, let's shove it there. And it is still growing tremendously. But there's other data that people are a little more protective of and they'll keep it on site.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Bronson, your thing's up. You excited?
So really, I think from a Veeam perspective, right, especially when we start talking about cybersecurity, I think this is a very important topic. And so really when you look at this from that 10,000 foot view, this is the NIST framework that I think is a pretty agreed upon standard, right, in the industry nowadays. So just kind of where Veeam sits inside of this wheel is, from identifying what workloads need to be protected, protecting them, obviously following the 3-2-1 rule. There's a lot of different components. If we can go maybe build out the slide, we can kind of talk through it here a little bit. So from an identify perspective,
Bronson, I don't think he can because it was green and it would disappear in our set. So he had to doctor it. So you might just have to pretend.
That's fine.
Use your imagination.
That's fine.
Visualize.
That's just fine. So from an identify perspective, right? And this is true whether it be on-prem, VMware, Hyper-V, AHV, doesn't matter. If we're talking EC2 for Amazon or Azure, this wheel is all going to be, exactly the same or synonymous here. So from an identification perspective, we can leverage policy-based backup jobs or policies, right? So it can be tag-oriented. So if you kind of go back and take a step back, if you build out tags inside of VMware, for example, gold, silver, bronze, high, medium, low, right? Kind of talking to the tiers of applications, you can tag those workloads, and then Veeam can watch for that, and then we can pull them in. So you don't even have to go back into the Veeam interface to protect some of these workloads. So it becomes dynamic, scalable, makes it very simple. And we do have things like data locality, right? We can make sure data is staying where it's supposed to, California, GDPR, those type of things, right? So you can identify what workloads are there, what needs to be protected. And then obviously from a protection standpoint, we got 32110. I think that's kind of the base, the foundation of all of this, making sure that, we are following best practices. We have immutable copies, right? I think that is becoming paramount.
Yeah.
That is something that we're talking about every single day. In fact, most times now, people are having maybe a single copy on-prem, but we're seeing now where it's expanding more into a double play or a triple play of sorts, where they have an immutable copy locally, immutable copy sitting in like S3, for example, and then if they're going to tear it down for long-term, kind of similar to a tape architecture, right? Tear it down to like Glacier Deep, which could also be immutable, right? Now you've got 3 sets of immutability on that same backup image. So, and then really, I think from a protection standpoint, what I like to call out is Veeam is very, very flexible with how we can deploy, right? And how we can protect these workloads. And it's not just about backup, right? I think from my perspective, it's replication, right? Having VMs stood up at a DR site ready to go, should you need it. You're not trying to spin up these machines on the fly. They're already ready to run. And we can do that with our standard VM replication or CDP, right? Continuous data protection. So we can get RPOs down to 2 seconds. So you're talking minimal downtime, minimal data loss. As far as detecting goes, we have the ability, and I think JD mentioned it earlier, we have the ability to scan the contents of the backups. So what JD mentioned when we're talking about it sitting quiet for 100 days, 70 days, it's embedding itself inside the backup. So if you do need to restore, oftentimes you're going to re-inject that threat, that malicious threat back into the infrastructure.
Yeah.
So we can detect that. We can tell you that there's an active ransomware activity happening real time. We can detect, obviously, incremental backup sizes. If they're bloated suddenly, we're going to alert on that. So I think it's really about kind of just arming them with as many tools as necessary.
That's a horrifying thought. So how do you keep like an archival backup just in case that does happen, that your backups do get infected? Do you keep one that's like 180 days? I mean, honestly, that's kind of terrifying.
You can. I think that becomes a compounding data loss issue, though, right? Because now you got hit. Your most recent backups and your actual production data is not viable anymore.
Yeah.
And now you got to go back 150, 60, 70 days. I mean, now that is a catastrophic failure. So from a Veeam perspective, we can actually take your most recent recovery point and remove the ransomware threat.
Oh, even better. Okay. So, that's better.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And then as far as responding goes, we talked about it a little bit earlier, orchestrating this, right? Having it pre set up and ready to run should you need it. Have your run books built out. Your failover plan. So, if something does happen, you're not trying to figure out how the puzzle goes back together, Humpty Dumpty, if you will, right?
Yeah.
Now you can just right-click, execute, and all those workloads come back up.
Yeah.
And that's really where we come in from a recovery perspective. In my opinion, Veeam is really a Swiss Army knife of tools, right? Because that notion that not all data is created equal, that follows suit when it comes time to recover, right?
Yeah.
It's whether it be an individual file or folder, one VM, an entire application, or an entire data center.
Yeah.
You need to have tools ready to go.
Yeah, and if you prioritize those beforehand, it's easier to react in the situation.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and if you've been testing it, right, now
Yeah.
you have all the confidence in the world that you can just execute, and that you know exactly how long it's going to take to get those workloads back online.
Gosh, yeah. I wish I'd known you a couple of years ago, Bradson.
You guys ready to take a bunch of questions?
Sure.
Yeah, we've got a few for
Okay,
you.
let's win. Okay.
Win. Let's win.
Team Candy Corn's gonna win.
Go fight, win.
All
at the
right. With all the various interconnections and network VLAN configs, what's the best practice to test a Veeam backup? Restore to a new VM instance? MNT Undra.
Yeah. So a couple ways you could do this. If you do want to spin it up as a new VM instance, we can remove it from the network, spin it up on demand. That process usually takes about a minute, right? So if you just wanted to test an individual machine, then certainly, I think instant VM restore is what we call that. Just don't connect it to the network. If you're looking for more of a whole, kind of a holistic approach where you want to automate it, Sure Backup is the component inside Veeam that would spin up one or multiple machines inside a sandbox, allow you to test it, verify, right? Run your own scripts inside if you need to. We can actually do an antivirus malware scan at that time as well, right? So kind of going back to the 32110, this is how you know there are 0 errors inside of your backups because we're going to test that automatically for you. So Sure Backup would probably be the best.
That's cool.
The best way to automate that.
I think that goes to Team Ardbeg, doesn't it?
I think
Yeah.
so.
Come on,
Yep,
man.
there we are. All right, next question. Veeam support Nutanix/AHV now?
It does.
Yep.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Fully.
Absolutely.
So VMware, AHV, and Hyper-V are now all supported by the Veeam backups.
Yep.
I
I
think
think
we're-
RHV is in there too. Red Hat.
Yeah, that's true. We just added that.
Yep. Yeah. So another hypervisor platform.
I think that ties us up now. Boy, this is getting intense. All right, next question. Hey, folks, does Google Workspace have the same shared responsibility model? Ethan H.
They do.
Yep.
They do. Absolutely. Yep. I think this is the same for all cloud platforms, right? I mean, they're really focused on uptime, availability, ping, power, pipe, right, for the application. The data inside is always the responsibility of the customer.
Well, it goes with someone in the chat say replication is not a backup.
That's
so
correct.
If you see replication, then you just have to assume that backups are not happening unless you specifically set it up.
And neither is snaps. So snapshots are not backup either. And I think a lot of folks get that misconception as well. And just because it's being replicated or snapped, that's not a backup. Those snaps can be corrupted and then immediately sent over to another location. So you've got to have a third party or a third way to do that.
If I take a snapshot of a VM and I leave it on for 3 months and it grows to 5 terabytes, I can still back that up.
I think you're making a lot of people very nervous at home right
Making
now,
me
just so
nervous,
you
too.
know.
That scares me. Now you're effectively, you should have had a physical machine at that point. You know.
Okay, we have one more question. What is Veeam recommending to backup hardware environment to stop hacking encryption? Crazy Mouse.
Interesting. I think I don't know that we're going to stop anything. I think from a Veeam perspective, we are part of that security, the posturing, right? From a ransomware perspective, we're hopefully not going to be the first line of defense, right? There's going to be IDP, intrusion detection, and whatnot there. Antivirus, trying to protect the workstations, the end clients there, firewalls, obviously. But I think Veeam is more of a, if all else fails, if they've been able to penetrate the infrastructure and get in, we're going to give you the ability to restore that data.
I think if you're looking for us to recommend like a front end, I mean, obviously you've got experts in your team that can do that. You know, folks like the Varonis's of the world that are on the front end of that, really looking at that data and the ingress of who's coming in and what are they doing with that data. That's really your first line of defense, is figuring out how do I stop the front end of that.
Right.
Veeam just comes in on the back end and says, if it happens, here's how you get it back and you're not down.
Exactly.
So there's different types of breach. So someone sends out a link, they're successful phishing. That's a very contained breach right there where it's easy to do backup. But if it's something like happens to Uber where they get all of it, that's where immutable backup is necessary.
Correct.
Otherwise, because if they get that much control, they also control your backups.
Yes.
Yep.
Right.
All right, we do have one more question that snuck in. Does Veeam support legacy software like VAX systems? Try Mad Sky.
I haven't seen VAX in ages.
I haven't either.
I would have to get back on that.
I'd have to circle back. That's a good question. That's a really good question.
We will take that as a follow-up item.
I don't even know what VAX Systems is.
I don't either.
So let us get back to you on that answer. We'll send it in.
Yep.
Yeah, so what is a VAX system? I haven't heard that either.
Prevents COVID.
There's VAX and there's anti-VAX systems, obviously.
Good thing we don't want to monetize this video.
I don't have a lot of detail
No,
on that.
we may risk getting this taken down. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Well, you
Other
can't talk
than-
about COVID on YouTube.
Well, okay. I need you to go read YouTube's policies. They're a little intense.
All right, go ahead.
I haven't seen it in so long that, for me, it was one of those situations where it was probably 20 years ago that I was dealing with a VAX system up at one of the universities, and it was an old legacy application, and not many people were still supporting it back then. And so I would say, hey, look, somebody says they know what VAX is. Let's see what they say, right? I don't have a lot of detail on it anymore because I just didn't dive into it.
Yeah.
So this is one, since I'm not going to be able to put the answer up live, if I'm trying to
AS400.
try Mad Sky, if you email us So we have your email address. If you
That's
send us
the
the
original-
information, we can send it back out to you.
Original
course.
mainframe for thin client systems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were using it in their labs, now that I remember right, their student labs.
All right. Final thoughts.
Well, it feels good to win again. I mean, I'm a member of the team in a sense that, you know, well, Nick Young was a member of the championship Lakers, but it's just good to be involved.
Sports.
That's a good reference there. That's a good reference.
Oh, there's another question though. You want to answer that one so we can win really quick?
Is there a max size?
Is there a max size that supports file server data to back up to on-premises/cloud?
No, I don't think so. I mean, you have a volume limitation in like VMware. 64 terabytes is the largest volume you can have in vSphere. But yeah, I mean, I've actually got one customer now that's got a 78 terabyte file server that we protect just fine, no issues. In fact,
78 terabytes.
our incrementals on that are like 23 minutes. It's very, very fast.
Wow.
So
I think it has to do with what's your pipe size and how fast you want to get that data out or back.
yeah, and do you have a backup window restrictions that we're working in there? We can certainly help there. We can help size that to work within those restrictions.
Well, it sounds to me that, like I said, we've been doom and gloom for the whole month of security. So, but overall, I think it's one of those: be prepared, but don't let it dominate your life. Just have the proper setup in place and enjoy your time.
Yeah. I mean, it gives a lot of comfort to a customer who knows that even if I do get hit, I've got my setup set up where I can come back in minutes or seconds on my most critical workloads from an immutable copy. I can spin it up in multiple locations. It can be on-prem, it can be a cloud target. Doesn't matter to us where you put it. That's the other great thing about Veeam is if your entire infrastructure is down on-prem, Veeam can spin it off-site somewhere just as easily.
Yep.
And so that really gives folks that are responsible for that, the C-level suite, a lot of comfort in their thoughts that they know I will not be held hostage in the case of an accidental deletion or a malicious attack.
Yep. And we can recover from anywhere to anywhere, right? Take a backup of a VM locally. We could restore it to EC2 and then run it there, and we could then restore it over to Azure. So you have total flexibility, total control with the Veeam platform. So
That's awesome.
We appreciate your time. This was very knowledgeable. Great for me to learn some about backups. It's an area I don't get to dive into a lot. It seems to be one of those, I don't want to say set it and forget it because you want to do your testing, but one of those, if you don't have cause to dive in, you're just kind of on the outside. So I appreciate your insight.
Thanks for letting us.
thanks for having us.
We appreciate it.
For PDQ.com, I'm Jordan.
I'm Tara.
Thanks for joining our webcast today. Congratulations, Ethan H., winner of PDQ swag. Send us your info at webcast@pdq.com. Thanks again, and we will see you back here next week.